I sincerely hope that you've already watched the Mahogany Clock Parts 1, 2, and 3. And if you haven't, I suggest you do so now before you go any further with this video, because it'll make a lot more sense if you do. When I ended the video, the Mahogany Clock Part 3, I indicated that I was going to show you what makes it tick. Well, I guess I better do that now. In my YouTube video, Repairing a Wall Clock, I swapped out the mechanical movement for a quartz chiming movement. Now that movement I got from Craft Time Clockery, and I thought I may as well use that same kind of movement in this mahogany clock, because it sure sounded nice. You know, when I emailed in my order for this movement, I told them, take your time, I'm only just starting this clock. But it only seemed like about 3 or 4 days, and my wife was calling down to the workshop, there's a package here for you. Now that is good service. Anyway, back to the clock case. Here I have to trim off just a smidgen so that it matches up with the front frame. Remember way back, I think it was in video number 1, I said that the front was actually going to be a big door. Well, here you're going to see what I was talking about. Now the reason for this is so it will be extremely easy to change the batteries or do any servicing on the clock you may have to do. Or if you want to put in a mechanical movement later, it'll also make it a little easier. Although I don't know why anybody would want to do that, because this one sounds so good. Now I know I've mentioned this once before in one of my other videos, but this drill press that I got from Canadian Woodworker is just perfect for somebody like me who's got a workshop down in their basement. It's so versatile, you can adjust it almost any way you want. Now I think I've taken this thing apart for the last time before I do the final sanding and then the varathane. And I still have to put in the latch system for the front panel. And I'm going to use the same magnetic system as I used for the little doors. It'll work great. Before I can do the final sanding, I've got to mount those finials in place. I had originally thought that I could use sort of a dowel to peg them on, but then I realized that if the clock was ever dropped, and they were so securely fastened on, it's possible that the case itself would be cracked, and it would be pretty hard to repair. So I thought this way, if they're dropped, they'll just snap off, and they can just be glued back on. Now I know there's a lot of squeeze out there, but I've done this before, and I've found that if I do a good job of sanding this down, you're not even going to be able to see where the joint is. My main concern right now as I'm looking at this is it going to actually look nice when it's hanging on the wall? This clock is radically different from any other clock I've ever made. Where the top and bottom center finials were attached to the front frame, it just didn't look finished. I knew that I was going to have to carve this portion away so that it sort of matched up with the round finial, and carving is definitely not my thing. This sample that you see right here I took down to Canadian Woodworker, and one of the guys there is actually a carver, and he showed me what to do and how to do it and recommended this knife, so I bought it. This actually went better than I thought it would, because this knife did not come with a power cord. And I'm just all thumbs when it comes to doing something by hand. I now have a new appreciation for some of those lifelike hand carvings that I've seen. But you know, I'm starting to like doing this. I'm at the point now where I've got everything trimmed down about as much as I can. And what I'm doing here is I'm trying to get rid of all that excess squeeze out that was at the joints. And then I guess it's just a case of going over it with fine sandpaper by hand. Here the two main pieces have been gone over with fine grit sandpaper, and it's just a case now of going over the little door frames, and then I better go out and buy some varathane. Now when I went to the hardware store just now, the small tin, 8-ounce tin of varathane was around $8, and the 32-ounce tin was $16 or thereabouts. So you get 4 times as much by only spending twice as much. So logic says buy the big tin. But usually when I do that, a few months down the road, I haven't used all of the big tin, and I've got myself half a tin of jelly, or maybe even harder. I'm pretty sure the reason why the varathane turns to jelly or even harder is because there's air in the tin. So I'm going to empty half of the tin into a pint sealer here and try and put the lid on so that there's as little air as possible, and see what happens 6 months down the road. Well, here you can see there's only a tiny little bubble of air trapped in that jar. There was probably a lot more air in the tin before I opened it. Well, there we are, preserved varathane. This is the very first coat on the very first piece. And you remember I said you're not going to be able to see where the glue was once the varathane is on? I can't see the glue, can you? I'm thinking 3, maybe 4 coats here, and a lot of sanding in between. It is now the second day, and everything except the back of the clock has had 2 coats. At this point I'm planning on giving it 1 more coat with that clear gloss, and then the final coat, number 4, will be a semi-gloss clear. I'm hoping that using a semi-gloss rather than a satin is going to retain that rich mahogany texture that you see here. A little over half a week has gone by now, and the back of the case has 2 coats on it. Everything else has 3, and that includes the pendulum rod and the 2 little samples that I've been covering as I've been going along. The reason I did little samples as I went along was so that when I got to the 4th coat, which is supposed to be the semi-gloss, I could actually test them first to see if I liked it. And here you can see that I've tested it, and I don't know if I like it. It gives it sort of a waxy appearance, and I don't know, it sort of seems to lose the richness of the mahogany. Maybe I'm not going to use it. I might have just wasted $8 on a tin of the stuff. Well, I guess you're going to have to wait for the Mahogany Clock Part 5 to find out what I decided.